Hey everyone, Ross Marchand here, Vice President of Policy for the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, and joining us today to discuss all things Section 230 liability protections on the digital domain is none other than Netchoice Vice President and General Counsel, Carl Szabo. So Carl, there's plenty to unpack here. But first, let's rewind all the way back to 1996 with the Communications Decency Act and something called Section 230 of said legislation. What exactly does that do in terms of protecting digital platforms, and how has it created the internet that we know and I want to say mostly love today?
You know, Ross, thanks for having me on. I'm going to roll it back even further. We're going to roll it back to the 1950s, and
Wow.
we're going to go all the way out to the West Coast to Los Angeles, where you have a bookseller, and he's just selling out of his shop. And a police officer walks up and looks through the book, and there's some salacious content, some quasi-pornographic content. And they actually had a law at the time in Los Angeles making the sale of such content illegal. So they tried to bring an action against the bookseller, and the courts looked at it and said, well, we can't ask a bookseller to be aware of every single word on every single page of every single book or magazine or newspaper that they sell. That's just absurd. So we're going to create what's called kind of conduit immunity. So if you're kind of just the throughways, the pipes that make communication possible or content available, but you're not the author, then we're going to create a special immunity for those people. And you saw this grow and morph over the many years. You see it similarly with telephone companies. You see it with cable providers, where they're not going to be held liable for something that's said on the evening news. Now you could go after the newspaper, the NBC News, but you're not going to go after Comcast or Verizon just because they provided the cables through which that content passed. Well, we're moving forward now into the internet era. And back to the East Coast and actually the Southern District of New York, you've got two cases. One involves a company called CompuServe, the other is called Prodigy. 92, you have a case, CompuServe. They are running a bulletin board. Somebody puts up some defaming content on the bulletin board. The person who's defamed sues CompuServe. The Southern District of New York decides, you know what, CompuServe, you're just a conduit. You're kind of like a library. You're kind of like that bookseller out in Los Angeles. We're not going to hold you responsible. You're just a conduit. Okay, a couple years later, same court, Prodigy, also now a bygone era tech company. But Prodigy, unlike CompuServe, said, we're going to be the family-friendly company. We want to make sure that we get rid of pornography. We want to make it more safe and quality. Similar suit, Prodigy gets sued for somebody putting some defaming content up. The plaintiff sues CompuServe, or sorry, the plaintiff sues Prodigy, and the court looks at it and says, well, we had this CompuServe a couple years ago, but this is different because Prodigy goes through and it looks for bad content. And because it does that, Prodigy is more like an editor of a newspaper than it is just a library.
Right.
And two representatives in Congress, Representative Chris Cox, Representative Ron Wyden, said this is absurd. We want to encourage platforms to create good space on the internet. So they sat down and wrote Section 230, which does two things. One, it says platforms are not responsible for the content created by others, essentially just inculcating into law that conduit immunity that they'd had for created over 40 years. And the second part, which is really the key part that not a lot of people talk about, is the Good Samaritan component, which basically says if you are a platform and you go out and you want to remove salacious, lascivious, objectionable content from your platform, that you're not going to be held responsible for either A, the removal of content that you find to be otherwise objectionable, or you will also not be liable for any content that you don't happen to see. So if I go ahead and say, I'm going to scrub pornography from my site, and there happens to be something in the corner that I miss, I'm not going to be held completely responsible. So that's what Section 230 does. It A, provides platforms clear legal status and enshrining the 60 years of court doctrine of conduit immunity. And two, it empowers them to go out, take down, and remove lewd, lascivious, and otherwise objectionable content from their sites and protect their users and their advertisers.
Right. So you have these well-established protections. But now, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure how the history has developed between now and then, but it seems now more so than ever, since that got enshrined into law in the mid-90s, it seems like it's under attack. And you have lawmakers like Senator Lindsey Graham and Josh Hawley, and they're trying through various mechanisms that they're proposing to undermine Section 230, to undermine these liability protections. So can you give us an overview of what is going on and what these threats are to liability protections?
Yeah, great question. And, one of the things we need to recognize is Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. It is the foundation, it is the basis, it is the engine of user-generated content on the internet. But for Section 230, you're not going to have YouTube, you're not going to have Facebook, you're not going to have Twitter, you're not going to have Wikipedia, you're not going to have Etsy, you're not going to have all these wonderful services that we rely on every day in and out. I mean, heck, I just bought something earlier today. I went to Amazon, read some reviews. Those reviews are made possible by Section 230. Section 230 is like the oxygen for the internet. You don't notice it till it's gone, and you don't recognize its value until you don't have it anymore.
Right.
And so what you're seeing is some legislators attacking Section 230. Now, are they doing that because they want to eliminate our ability to post Yelp reviews of bad restaurants? No, or at least I hope not. No, what they're doing is they're doing what's called working the refs. They are, on the right, are upset about platforms removing content that they think should be left up. Well, let's use one of the more recent examples with the president's Twitter account would be an example of that. They get upset about those types of actions. But it's not just on the right. It's on the left too. The left is upset that platforms are not doing enough to take down content. And they're seizing on Section 230 because it is the oxygen for the internet. And they're saying to these internet platforms, we will cut off your oxygen supply if you don't do what we say.
Mm-hmm. So
And they're trying to force them into doing what they want.
Right. And I love that frame of the oxygen, right? It just fuels the internet. Now, if you take that oxygen away, what happens to not just Facebook and Twitter, but smaller digital platforms, let's say TripReview, TripAdvisor, and all sorts of just comment platforms? What happens to those platforms, the ones that we don't normally talk about in this debate?
See, that's the problem. We don't normally talk about them in this debate. And it's those things that we take advantage of and we take for granted. Sherwin C. from Wikimedia Foundation just a couple of days ago talked about, without Section 230, we don't have Wikipedia.
Right.
Wikipedia, the encyclopedia for everyone on everything, something we go to every single day. That's one of these sites that will just kind of disappear. We see it, Yelp reviews would be a good example. Imagine if we do what some are proposing in the Senate right now, is called the PACT Act. And it is basically creating a notice and takedown regime for defamation. Now, defamation is somebody says something mean about me, it's untruthful, I want that removed. Well, the PAC Act kind of supercharged defamation. It says, you know what, you can go after, let's use Yelp. You can go after Yelp for defaming content. And so I'm a restaurant and somebody comes in and they had a bad experience and they wrote a bad review and they say, oh, this restaurant is the worst on the planet and there are rodents all over the restaurant, which is a false statement. Well, I, as the restaurant owner, then turned to Yelp and said, that review needs to come down. Well, what if that statement was in fact truthful? Who is Yelp to believe? And this is one of the problems that's created by the PACT Act, is you're asking platforms to either do what is legally difficult, which is to kind of trust the reviewer, or they do what is legally responsible, which is just automatically take down any potentially defaming content when you receive a complaint. So that's some of these small examples that you're talking about of stuff that will be impacted with some of the efforts that we're seeing in Congress.
Right. And I'm sure that, as time goes by, these proposals, these legislative proposals are only going to grow in number. So if, customers and the denizens of the digital domain want to find out more information, hey, I mean, we're talking a lot about websites. What's your website? Where can we go to read more about this topic?
Thank you for the shameless plug. I appreciate it. You can learn more at my company's website, which is called Netchoice, NETCHOICE.org. There's also a website dedicated to protecting our online voices. It's in fact protectonlinevoices.org, where you can learn more about the history of Section 230, the actual statute, and read a lot about some of the activity going on right now.
Great. And on our end, you could read some news, analysis, and hot takes on Section 230 and all sorts of associated liability protections at protectingtaxpayers.org. That is, again, protectingtaxpayers.org. Well, thanks so much, Carl. Great insights, and we'll see, what happens in terms of this debate, in terms of Section 230 protections.
And we'll see. Hopefully, legislators make the right choices.
Hopefully, they use their common sense. They use their noggins.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.